We're going to have open contact and start being introduced to these beings within the next 5 years at the outside. It's imminent. It's imminent. We're right on the cusp, and they will reintroduce themselves to our society now that we have evolved. We may start seeing more ships. They may actually sort of put themselves in certain positions and hold themselves there, so we get used to the idea. One of the gifts that I've been told they will be giving us when we have open contact is holographic representations of our complete history. So I'm very excited about that. They would literally be able to show us holographic representations of Atlantis, of dinosaurs, of all these things. That'll be
Oh
exciting.
my, oh my. This is just getting more and more exciting. Darryl Anka, a warm welcome to the show. How are you doing?
I'm doing great. Thank you so much for having me. I appreciate it.
I'm really excited about having you on the show. I've been following you and watching you for years, and you are the channeler of Bashar, who is an extraterrestrial energy or being from the future. And you've been channeling him for quite some time, for around 40 years.
Yes, 40 years.
And yeah, and the Bashar material has been known and said to be one of the most compelling and relevant and dynamic information delivered to this planet to this date. And you are also a director, film producer, doing so much more. And to me, Bashar is really having a teaching that's so self-empowering and powerful teaching. And I'm really curious to hear more about that today, and especially his perspective on the shift of consciousness.
Okay.
Now, before we dive into all of that, for those who are new to you, I assume many in my audience know who you are, but those who are new to you, could you share a little bit about your work and who Bashar is?
All right. Well, this all began for me 50 years ago when I had two broad daylight UFO sightings here over Los Angeles, which started me investigating all sorts of stuff having to do with UFOs and metaphysical phenomena. So many years after the sightings, I was introduced to a channel who was conducting seminars. The entity coming through that channel offered to teach a channeling class. I went into it not thinking I was going to be a channel, but I just wanted to understand how channeling could be taught. So during the class, which was a series of guided meditations to get you in touch with whatever you wanted, you could be your own creativity, your own higher mind. But I received what I can only describe as a telepathic communication and connection from Bashar that allowed me to experience within a split second a memory of having made an agreement to do this before this life, and understanding that the UFO had been shown to me to get me to start moving forward and doing the research I needed to do, so that when it came time to do the channeling, I would be somewhat prepared. And while all this was going on in my head, I didn't say anything. This happened in literally a split second. The entity coming through the channel teaching the class stopped talking and turned to me and said, "There's an entity here for you right now, if you're ready to begin." And I also noticed that someone behind me in the class had picked up on the same image of Bashar that I'd seen in my head, and she was sketching it on a piece of paper. So I had two outside validations that this wasn't just my imagination or a hallucination or anything like that. And so I decided, all right, let's see where this is going to go. So I started practicing more, and the teacher offered to allow me to co-channel the next class with him because I'd made a lot of progress. And it was in that class that a woman came and asked to have channels as a subject of her thesis paper on the connection between psychology and channeling. So I would go to her house, I would channel for her friends, she would write her notes and make her paper. And, word of mouth started spreading, more and more people started showing up week after week, until we had to start doing it twice a week, and then we had to start doing it in two houses, and then I had to start renting auditoriums. I started getting invited to different cities, different countries, and here I am 40 years later, in a nutshell, still channeling. So That's
Right.
very brief idea of how it all kind of came together.
Amazing. Now, Bashar is in the future. Now,
Parallel reality.
right, right. Is he connected to you somehow?
Well, yes, of course, we've made an agreement to do this. I mean, from different perspectives, you can kind of say that, we might be the same soul in different time frames, in different parallel realities, or, we're connected through the agreement that we've made to do this. There are many ways to look at it, all of which could be the exact answer, none of which could be the exact answer. All I know is this is the agreement that was made to do this. So exactly how we're connected energetically, I'm not exactly sure. He could be part of a larger, well, he is part of a larger group that I might be connected to, sort of like an extended non-physical or physical team, like with spirit guides and soul family and so on and so forth. So he might be part of that. I might be part of the same soul family. So there are many ways to kind of look at it, but it's not so much important how we are connected relational wise, because it's more about what's the information, and does the information help people, and does it work for people, which over 40 years we've discovered that it certainly does.
Now, what I've been curious about for a long time is our history. Whether the Darwin's theory about survival of the fittest is actually in one way incorrect, and that we have been perhaps created by extraterrestrials, and that our history is incorrect, and that the pyramids and mysteries are really pointing to this, and that this is the information coming forward. And I'm curious now what Bashar's perspective is on how was humanity created?
Yes, he's talked about this. Now, it doesn't necessarily negate the concept of evolution, because evolution can happen at any stage when anything is created. So evolution can still be part of the idea, whether you want to call it survival of the fittest or not. But, selective, evolution. But yes, Bashar's told the story that many, many hundreds of thousands of years ago, there was an extraterrestrial group that came to this planet to do something in particular they needed for their planet, to mine certain materials, and that it was a daunting task for them to be able to accomplish in the time they needed to accomplish it. And so they had a very advanced knowledge of genetics, and they looked around and saw that there was a naturally evolved hominid on the planet. We would refer to it as something like Homo erectus, or one of those naturally evolved hominids. And they decided that they could inject their genetic material into this hominid and create something that was a little bit more like themselves, to help them with this work. And so they created Homo sapiens sapiens. And we became a species based on the introduction of that extraterrestrial genetic material. And this is why you have, the rough translations of the, biblical phrases like, man was made in the image of God, and so on and so forth, is the gods at those times were really these ETs that we considered to be so much more than ourselves, that we were made in the image of. And so they weren't necessarily, according to their laws, supposed to have done that. And therefore they were eventually recalled, and the remainder of their society still had to take responsibility for the fact that we had been created. And so they had to sort of watch over us for quite a while to make sure that we would be able to move forward on our own path, that we would evolve, into a society that could sort of be left on its own. And again, this is where you get a lot of the stories of, angels visiting humanity and looking out for them and protecting them, and, people being led to different places by mysterious phenomena like, pillars of light and things like that. So I think that then after a time, when they realized that we could create our own civilization. They sort of left us to our own devices. They were always watching, but wanted to see which way we would go with our free will. And now we've arrived, I think, at a point where they have been watching for quite some time. And I think we are approaching the time where they are about to let us know that they've always been here. We're about to have open contact. I think it's actually pretty imminent now. And they will reintroduce themselves to our society now that we have evolved to a certain point where we're starting to explore the idea of expansion of consciousness. We're starting to understand we're not alone in the universe, and all these kinds of things open us up to being able to receive them again, but more as equals rather than as something so much greater than us. Yes, they are more advanced, but that doesn't necessarily mean on a soul level that they're better than us. So once we have arrived at this point where we may be ready to understand how to interact with extraterrestrials, I think we're about to be reintroduced to them in the next few years.